Hey there, my name is... but my friends call me Hyena, and welcome to my first podcast episode. This time on Who I Want to Know, I'm interviewing Ames Bierly, co-owner and operator of Bierly Brewing in McMinnville, Oregon. Bierly Brewing is a gluten-free brew pub with many allergen-free options, with a wide selection of delicious beer and food to enjoy. Ames is also my boss. We recorded this in the dining area of the brew pub, and the audio quality wasn't super primo. I recorded it with a Rode Go Wireless Pro using a voice memo app on my phone, and being new to this, I ran into some issues. I didn't know my app wasn't already set to record in stereo, and my mic at one point got tucked into my shirt. The audio wasn't super great, so I tried out Adobe Podcast Suite, which was nice but had issues too. Some parts of this might sound a little weird, but stick with me because it can only get better from here. Yeah, I know you, but do I know you?
I could do it with my dominant hand. That works.
Oh, how's your tea?
Let's see. It's real hot. It's good.
Hell yeah. I heard that's like the best quality of a good tea.
The temperature?
Yeah.
Unless it's iced tea.
Shit.
I gotcha there.
Yeah. So Ames Bierly,
Yeah.
you run and operate Bierly Brewing. I mean, the kitchen at least. JP does the other half, your husband.
Yes.
Tell me how this whole thing got started.
In 2006, JP and I were dating and getting to know each other's families, and we were very serious, moving in together. And my dad has a history of home brewing, and he suggested that he and JP do some home brewing together to spend time together, get to know each other.
That's so sweet.
Bonding. Yeah.
That's so adorable.
My dad is very sweet.
Your dad's such an awesome guy.
He's so good. And my dad had like a little kit that we got him for his birthday, like a little plastic barrel. I think it was called Mr. Beer. I don't know if you remember those.
I don't think I've ever heard of Mr. Beer.
Mr. Beer. Now JP is Mr. Beer. Come a long way. But they started homebrewing together, and then because so many people in my family are gluten-free because of celiac disease, they started trying to experiment a little bit with gluten-free beer. It was before any of the gluten-free breweries that exist now were in operation. At the time, there was one guy with a Facebook page called Gluten-Free Home Brewing, and he would share recipes, and he had a little community there. And so I remember JP being like, Brian on Gluten-Free Home Brewing says that, here's a recipe for something that's kind of like a pale ale. So we're going to try this pale ale with orange peel and cardamom, whatever.
Ooh.
And he would go to homebrew stores in Hillsboro, in Beaverton, and get the different syrups and some, I don't even think they were malting rice at that point, large scale, but maybe
So we owe a lot of this to Brian.
Yes.
Wow.
And now Brian is still a good friend of JP's. They got to know each other personally.
That's awesome.
Brian lives in Ashland.
so cool.
He and his wife Alyssa come up here every so often to visit. I distinctly, very vividly remember JP being like, this guy Brian. And now, 18 years later, now we're like, oh yeah, Brian's coming up to visit. Awesome. And they'll spend a lot of time on the phone talking about methods and ingredients and everything. So that's kind of where it got started. Then JP discovered that he was a little bit better at brewing gluten-free beer than the kind of barley-based home brewing that they were doing. And he got really interested in this new technology, these new ingredients and old ingredients that were being used for new things. People started saying hey, where can I get some of this beer? Can I buy this beer that you're bringing to this party? Can you make beer for my wedding? Because we're all gluten-free here. And the answer was always, you can't buy it because it's homebrew and that's illegal, but I'll bring you some. Wink. Well, So at that time, I was in college and graduate school for teaching. I ended up being a teacher for a few years, but kind of on the back burner, I was like helping with how do you make a business plan? How do you run a small business? What are the loopholes and administrative things that I could help with while he's doing the beer part? And, what if someday we did this as part of our jobs, or he did it as part of his jobs? That was never my plan. So he did. He found a gluten-free restaurant in Philomath that we were regulars at. The owners offered him a little space in their kitchen, like once a week, to come and brew and do all the things he needed to do, keep his beer in their coolers. And so he would drive on Sunday afternoon to Philomath, sometimes stay overnight, take all of Monday, because he was still working full-time at the time. And he was able to sell at that point because he was making it in a commercial kitchen. So he started selling kegs to restaurants and for special events. And as soon as he started putting beer in bottles, that's when he outgrew that space. And that's when we moved up here to McMinnville. So the next part of the story is that he found this little space in McMinnville that was the zoned 50-50 commercial retail. Commercial and production.
Gotcha.
So like you had to have a retail aspect, and you had to have a
space for
if you had a production. Yeah, you couldn't just produce and sell wholesale from that spot. So it's like, would you consider making a few food things so that we can have a tasting room, so that I can have this space?
Yeah, you start with like charcuterie and...
Yeah, it was like a sausage plate. It was soft pretzels. I remember asking him, like, what do you want me to make? And he really leans hard into the German beer styles. That's his passion.
Right.
The lagers. And he was like, well, what about like pretzels and mustard? That's like what he thinks about when he, for food, when he thinks about German beers. And I had never made soft pretzels before, but I said I would try. My first ones were really bad, but they tasted okay.
And now they're phenomenal.
Well, thank you very much.
They are some of the best soft pretzels I've had, gluten-free or otherwise.
Thanks.
They are incredible pretzels.
Thank you.
So, yeah, the food here is absolutely nuck and futz. So, that's kind of crazy to think that it started off with just like sausage and some shitty attempts at pretzels.
Exactly.
Like that. Seeing how far it's come in that amount of time is wild.
Yeah.
Right. So I've only been working here since July of last year. And that's like what, 7 months? 6 months?
Like seven, yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
Our beginnings were very humble. I was working with a convection oven from Costco, like a tabletop oven, an induction burner, one household refrigerator, and...
Was that a Mr. Fridge refrigerator?
Mrs. Fridge, actually.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, sorry. Don't want to misgender the fridge. That's...
We are an inclusive space. Of course. And then pretty quickly after we opened, I started doing like, well, what if I did like a different thing every week? We had our little menu, like a hummus and pita plate with veggies, sausage plate with baguette slices that I made also, the pretzel, and then we did like nachos, just like you put corn chips and different stuff on the thing and then you toast it and then it's melty and, crowd pleaser. It worked. And then I would do a different thing every week, like cookies or breadsticks. And then one day I did donuts. I brought in my tiny little tabletop deep fryer from home and I made cinnamon sugar donuts. And I don't think I ever stopped making donuts after that. That's when people were like, I haven't had a fried donut since I went gluten-free. And that's where our donuts came from.
Yeah, and I mean, your donuts are absolutely delicious in my case. I got sick late in life, and that's what made me go gluten-free. Like, I can't digest gluten anymore. My skin breaks out, I get real sick. And eating your food after eating so many terrible gluten-free foods that were just like a hardened sponge with some sauce on it, coming to a place like this where there's like the donuts are like crispy on the outside, but they are so like delicately soft and delicious with such like I don't want to use the word complex flavor, but because it's a fucking donut,
Right.
But
Yeah.
like you have such a variety of ideas for donuts all the time. Like the London Fawn donut, it's so good. It's my
You
favorite.
still talk about that one. Yeah.
I got a little teary-eyed eating that donut.
Oh.
Like you're an artist when it comes to this food, dude.
I remember you texted me about it later.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always feel extra, good about what we did when somebody, texts me later about their experience eating the food. Yeah.
Man, that's wild. Yeah. So you mentioned that you were a music teacher. Yeah. So you're essentially someone who went to college for music and education, and you're a self-taught businessman. Like
Yes.
you learned everything on your own as far as how to keep Bierly going.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me too. JP's education's also in music, right?
Yeah, he started college as a business major because it seemed like a good idea and because of like what he thought he would be doing with his life. But he had always done music as a young person and quickly found more of a community in the music department and ended up going into arts administration, like helping run like a museum or an orchestra, that kind of thing.
Wow.
Yeah, I had no direct business experience. I'd worked at businesses. I'd, helped to like do the day-to-day running of businesses downtown, when I was a teenager working retail. But I took a class at Chemeketa that was called like How to Start Your Own Business.
The Businessy 101 kind of thing.
Yeah. And that was helpful because it taught a lot about like licenses, how to apply for business license. Here's the places you might need to go to. Here's some of the information you didn't know. That was real helpful. And then I think one of the most helpful resources for me was my friend Angie. She had a gluten-free bakery actually in the same spot that we ended up taking over with the brewery. And she's still a customer of ours. I saw her family yesterday in here, and she sat down with me and talked about like equipment, things like scaling recipes up when you're doing like huge batches of things, stuff like what are the things that people seem to want and look for in gluten-free food, and just she shared so much of her time and knowledge with me that was really useful, and also just helped me bolster my confidence in like, yes, I can do this. I have knowledge, I have resources, I have a community, and I can try it out.
That's awesome. It's crazy that you met so many people at the start of things that are still around, like to this day. Like you have so many people around you that, like, people come in all the time that I end up talking to that I've known, because I've lived in this area my entire life, right? I grew up in Newburgh, just like 2 cities away, and I'm 30, so I've been here for a little while, and so many people that I run into that I know have known you for years and are like super fans of like what you do, and I'm like, oh my god, it's like I had like a mutual friend I didn't even know about, and
It's so true.
it was one person came in, I can't remember her name, but like I hadn't seen her since high school.
Dawn?
Yeah, Dawn. Yeah, thank you. See,
Yeah, she used to come to the old place like all the time.
right?
Yeah.
And yeah, she had mentioned that she had been coming since you were like the old place,
Yeah.
and like finding out that like she knew about this place, I feel like she was holding out on me a little bit. But like, I don't know, so many people around here by name, and their life story a little bit, and like you have all these connections. It's wild. It's something I think I strive to be, but like seeing you just so effortlessly create this like community by being a cool dude that does something awesome, like, I don't know, it's awesome. It's inspiring.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I had a good model in my parents. My mom is very, community-minded, like thinking about people she knows who might get along or have something in common or be able to be resources for each other. And she'll like set up a tea with two people who don't know each other yet, but she wants them to meet each other. And yeah, everybody knows her. I grew up as like, oh, you're Shara Roberts' kid, and now she gets, oh, you're Ames Bierly's mom. Which
that Uno reverse card.
Yeah, exactly. She feels proud when that happens, which is nice. And my dad spent his career as a professor at Linfield, and was a really great mentor to his students. He would have like students staying on over the summer to do research, and he'd write papers with them and present at conferences and like mentor kids who wanted to go to medical school or and just that mind for like what's a skill or a knowledge base that I have that could be of use or benefit somebody else who I care about, and I want this person to have a good time and succeed. And so why wouldn't I share a thing that I can share with them?
And mentioning your dad's research, do you want to tell me a little bit about like who your dad is? Because every time I learn more about your dad, I'm like, what the fuck? Who is this guy? How come I'm just now learning about him? I didn't learn about him in school. Like,
well, I don't think he's in any history books yet. I don't know. I mean, my dad, right now one of his big projects is that he is about to publish a book about celiac disease and gluten in general.
Do you know the title of it?
I don't. I wish I did.
Okay.
I don't know what it's going to be called.
Text it to me later, and if you find out, and I'll just add it to the description or whatever.
I have also his paper that just came out. There's a link that people can download it from.
Okay.
It's in an open journal.
Heck yeah. Love the open source.
Yeah. My dad and his friend Nadine, who is another person that I've known forever and was really helpful to us starting out. She's a healthcare worker specializing in gluten-related disorders. And the two of them worked on this research paper looking at clinical studies and research studies and working with patients to kind of look at whether celiac disease itself is the biggest sign of like, oh no, you shouldn't eat gluten, or whether there's a lot of people who don't have celiac disease genes and markers who still have the same extent of damage as people who do have celiac disease too. Because for a long time, the kind of common information that flows from doctors too is like, oh, if you have celiac disease, that's really serious. But if you don't, then it's not as important. But what you can see from the existing research is that's not the case. So that's kind of what they're presenting, is like actually many more people than the people who specifically have the celiac disease genes that we know about sustain the same type of damage to so many systems of the body. And it would benefit all of them to be gluten-free in the same way that it benefits people with celiac disease to be gluten-free.
That's wild. No. I don't even, that's so much. I'm still learning about celiac disease and just being gluten-free in general. I still screw up and eat things I'm allergic to, like, all the time. And I don't know. It's interesting to hear about, like, it being just as damaging even if you don't have celiac. Because at first I didn't take it very seriously, like being allergic. And now when I eat gluten, my skin comes off like Parmesan. Like, it's like Parmesan cheese flakes, you know? And my whole life was raised believing that, like, because I don't have celiac, bread is like just your basic, it's the basis of all food. You have noodles, you have, sourdough bread with Italian food. I guess that's also still noodles. That was a bad example. But, and it makes me wonder if I was all along having an issue with gluten and didn't know it. Because I've struggled with eczema and bloating and, like, stomach issues and like my skin, my lungs, my stomach have all been absolutely fucked up my whole life. And I'm wondering how much of that might actually have been a gluten intolerance that we just never caught on to. You know, I was never taken to an allergist or anything like that. It was just take some Benadryl and pray for it to get better kind of a thing.
Yeah.
You know, and having the stomach issues that I had in 2022 makes me really, I want to read that and see like what I learned from it, because it's something that's on my mind all the time, is like, how long has this actually been an issue versus when it actually did the most damage and like put me in the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that kind of story all the time. That's my mom's story also. And I remember growing up, the statistic was at that time that between the onset of like seeking medical help for issues with gut or whatever to diagnosis of celiac disease was 11 years on average in the United States. And it was about 1 year on average in Europe. And much more proactive in a lot of other countries with getting people diagnosed with celiac disease. And I don't know if that's less or more now, but I know for sure that, yeah, so many people grow up and so many people just exist as adults feeling crappy all the time and just popping Tums. And, like, we all have to do what we do to survive. Like, no shade if that's how somebody is choosing to live their life. But the culture that we live in really pushes the idea that that is normal. And I do want people to know that it is not normal or necessary to have to constantly mitigate the pain in your body because of the food that you're eating. And I am not a wellness person. I don't want people to eat all whole foods and non-processed everything.
Prilosec might send some people after you. You're going to hurt their business.
I am.
Whole business model based around soothing what we eat.
Yes. I'm a secret vigilante against Tums, apparently.
Prilosec. I don't know any other brand. Walgreens generic.
Yep. Walgreens is gonna ban me. I'm not gonna be able to pick up my hormones anymore.
That's a nightmare.
Yeah. So, if people want to learn about what things they might be eating that are hurting them, I think they should be able to do that easily. I think is my bottom line. If people don't want to, if they want to keep eating things that hurt them and thinking that that is normal experience and something that they are going to have to do for the rest of their lives, then that's their choice. But if somebody wants to figure out, like, hey, is this gluten? Is this dairy? Is this corn? Is this soy? Is this eggs? I don't know. It's like, I eat Doritos that are gluten-free. I am not out here saying that people should be cutting out processed foods.
Yeah, that's one thing about you. Even at work, you've always got a bag of Doritos. You're just walking around with a giant family-sized bag.
That's why I carry a backpack all the time for my Doritos.
That's why your fingers are always so sticky.
Yes.
So, knowing that your dad's done this research, he's writing papers, what kind of scientist, like, I know him as a scientist, but I don't know him as, like, a scientist of a certain study.
Oh, yeah. His background is in physiology.
Interesting.
His degree is, I guess, like zoology. Yeah. His career at Linfield was primarily like evolutionary biology, genetics, anatomy and physiology, the kinds of classes and studies that look at like living body systems. He specializes in receptor and cell biology, that kind of stuff. And he wrote a textbook about receptors a while ago. This is fun. He, instead of using like live animals like rats or bunnies or mice or something to use for his experiments for receptor research, he would go to a Carlton packing company, the meat company out of town, and pick up really fresh oxtails from after they butchered cows. And he would strip the receptors, like the blood vessels, out of them, because he was doing research on blood vessel constriction and how that is tied to temperature regulation in mammals. And
that's crazy.
Yeah. So he's
awesome.
He would just use the stuff that might go to oxtail soup, but also it wasn't being like specifically killed for his research.
That's really cool. It's almost like a pioneer in ethical, like sourcing of your.
Yeah, it was ingenious. I think he definitely did all the dissecting of rabbit, like looking at insides of rabbits and eggs.
And you mentioned he did that study at Linfield here in town.
Yeah, that's when he was doing that. That was when he was still teaching at Linfield. So he was working on his receptor research.
Because you had mentioned growing up, I mean, you mentioned this pretty often, but that his work teaching in colleges took you to like the Midwest, right?
Yeah. When you're a tenured faculty, you can take a sabbatical every 7 years, and you can take like a half year or a full year. And usually people take it to do research or write a book or do some type of like professional development work. And so when I was 2 and 3, we moved to Belgium for a year for my dad to work at the biology department of the university in Amsterdam. And then, when I was 15, 16, he went back to University of Wisconsin in Madison, where he did his undergrad work, to work with his old advisor, actually, on some of this, the temperature regulation and scaling work in that he was working on at the time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you grew up here in Mac then?
Yeah.
And you came back?
Yes.
Okay.
Reluctantly,
Gotcha.
At best. That was a real rough time for me here in town. I was really struggling with my mental health and finding a community, and I was at that time like splitting my time between like homeschool and the alternative school program at Mac High. And I found this really amazing alternative public school in Madison that I kind of fast-tracked myself through and ended up graduating at the end of my junior year, specifically so that I wouldn't have to make a decision about like
graduated
how
early.
how to come back and be at Mac High again,
And you did that through alternative school? Was it a GED or like?
No, it was like a high school that was founded in 1982 by a group of students in Madison who wanted a school that was more like student-directed and founded on the principles of like anti-racism and like socialism, I guess, is kind of how I would describe it. Maybe I think that's kind of like their ideal in that time was what they were hoping for the school to become, and I think that it was a really amazing place for those of us who like for whatever reason conventional public school hadn't worked out, and we felt drawn to this place that really treated us as liberated, autonomous people.
That makes sense.
Who deserve to make our own choices.
Right. I love the, like, you went into, like, a Zen meditation there to, like, figure out what you wanted to say.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if I should, like, say something and, like, to fill the air, but, like, you were just so, the closed eyes, like pulling it forward with your might. That was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like, because where I grew up, my late best friend, growing up, he was, like, an alt school kid.
Yeah.
And it wasn't from the perspective of you have the right to go your own path. It was a you're not welcome on the path that everyone else takes kind of story. It was, I know so many really smart people who went through the alternative school where I'm from, and they graduated early, or they got their GED and went to work in a trade school. They did really great things with their life. But the stereotypes that I always heard growing up were like, this kid slings drugs, this kid's got like mental health issues and isn't fit to be around other people because they're violent, or this kid's parents aren't around and therefore they have no like capability for responsibility. They're just a wild card that, the teachers don't want around while they're teaching the healthy students, quote unquote. And meanwhile, like in the main school program, I knew so many batshit crazy people that, I'm surprised that they function in a greater society. And so it's cool to hear another story from another state, from another person who's just a couple years older, who went to an alternative school and graduated early as like a choice. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I find that really cool. I don't know what else I have to say about the matter.
Yeah.
But like taking the steps on your own to kind of prove that you can go your own path in that way is really cool. And because I'm someone who I'm just now figuring out an internal locus of control. I'm figuring out what it means to really believe that I have a say in my life, in what goes on, in where I go, what I do, what I study. Very much, I grew up with the idea that I was forced to go with the flow as it was. Things happen and you kind of have to react, not you can take things and do like your own idea of what you want to do. And so seeing you, knowing that about you, knowing that you have your like a degree, but you chose to like do a business study on your own, knowing that instead of teaching music, you wound up running like this brew pub that's like super popular, people adore you, you're kind of a guy of the people, knowing that you're sort of a local leader in a lot of things. Like you have not just fans and customers, you have like a full community of people behind you. And that speaks so much truth to what I heard as an outsider to like alternative education, to the fact that it's not necessarily a death sentence to be in alt school.
Yeah.
It's not the end of your life. It could even be an option that you choose to take.
Yes. It's not like the trash can that they throw the bad
right,
kids
exactly.
into.
Exactly.
That's definitely what the kind of the vibe was around some of the other places that I experienced before I got there, for sure. But Shabazz, Malcolm Shabazz City High School is the name of it. It's still going up and running.
Shabazz City?
Shabazz. Hey, let's work on that. Okay. Yes. No. So Malcolm. So derail history deep cut. Not deep cut. Malcolm Shabazz is the name of Malcolm X after he converted from Nation of Islam to a more traditional form of Islam from the Middle East.
Gotcha.
Instead of the kind of like American-born Nation of Islam, which was what he converted to that when he was in prison.
Wow.
Earlier in his life, and worked in that framework for many years in his activism work. And then 5 years before he died, converted to Islam and ended up going on Hajj to Mecca. And when he was there is when he changed his name to Malik al-Shabazz. And then 5 years later was assassinated. And his philosophies kind of changed a little bit through that process. But he always spoke to the systems of oppression that exist, to keep certain people from experiencing the success and the joy that they should be able to experience in life, and allowing other people to experience more success than they maybe deserve when you look at the grand scheme of things. So the school was founded based on those principles of like noticing systems of oppression and working to dismantle them. We all had to take a class called Mirrors of Discrimination in our first term, and it was taught by Tenia Jenkins, who was in her youth the first child to be integrated into the school that had been the white school. She was in the first class of young black children who was like escorted, past the protesters into her new school. And she grew up to be a fabulous educator in Madison, and that was one of her projects that she created was this class, Mirrors of Discrimination.
A powerful spirit to be around.
Yeah.
That must have been really impactful to like know someone like that. Yeah. That's really cool, actually.
Yeah.
That's so many people that you know through life experiences. Like you mentioned knowing someone who was like a transgender activist in like the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And like I don't know. I don't know many people. And so I don't know many people who have that caliber of like a history, and so knowing that like you that young already had like that kind of people on your side is that's crazy cool.
I feel so lucky that I had those experiences because, growing up in the 80s and 90s, that wasn't really the vibe that we experienced here in in majority white schools that I went to in the era where we weren't really talking about like the actual history of the colonization of North America and what Columbus actually did. We were still celebrating Columbus Day in our schools and still doing things in Thanksgiving that we look back and wish we really hadn't been taught those things. And I feel really lucky that I had the opportunity as still a pretty young person to learn some of those, like, no, this is actually what happened. Like our main American history course at that school was working through Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, which starts with Columbus' genocide and goes through, Vietnam War up through the time after that, and really speaks to like, no, this is maybe what you were taught, but here's the stories that you weren't told about.
Right.
So that's what I try to do as a parent for my kids, is teach them in ways that they can digest at their current ages, kind of the foundations of that work, so that as they get older, they won't have to do so much like re-shifting in their brains and like unlearning and dismantling systems of white supremacy, and then have more of a framework already built in to add new ideas onto.
Wow. And that was in what state?
Wisconsin. A weird state to have a very like radical school in, but if you are familiar at all with Madison, that it was the center of a lot of the Vietnam War protests. It's a very liberal community. The University of Wisconsin at Madison is like a hub of radical thinking.
Right, you find that kind of thing in the places you would least expect it.
Absolutely.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, before you went to college, tell me about your life growing up in like Mac. You grew up here, right?
I grew up here, yeah.
Tell me about your mother.
I enjoyed growing up here a lot. We lived in the south end of town, basically on Linfield campus, in one of the little neighborhoods down there. My dad, walked one city block to his laboratory and office at Linfield.
The dream.
Yeah. Hell yeah. I went to Montessori school as a little kid, and then I went to this weird
Montessori school.
Montessori. So Montessori is a system of education created in Italy long time ago by a woman named Maria Montessori. And her philosophy had to do with like teaching children how to care for themselves and their spaces and their communities. And also she was had a lot of ideas about like sequences of education. Like when a kid starts doing this type of thing, that means that they're ready to learn about, volume, or when they do this, maybe they're ready for like this fine motor thing, and really building on skills. There's a wide variety of Montessori teachers and schools out there. We're really lucky in McMinnville to have a really great one that my kids go to now. So I went there when I was a kid.
Really? The school your kids go to is the one that you went as a child?
Yeah, it's a different building. Different,
but same
yes,
institution.
That is the same. And my parents were part of the founding families.
Wow.
They and another family founded the McMinnville Montessori School in like 1983 when my sister was younger, because there was not yet a secular preschool, and they felt really strongly that they didn't want to engage with like a church preschool or daycare. And they kind of decided between like, should we bring a Montessori school in or should we bring a Waldorf school in, which is a Waldorf is another type of education. And they settled on Montessori because one of the reasons was my dad's cousin was a Montessori teacher and kind of helped them start the school up. And here we are. Yeah, the school now goes up to age 11. When I was there, it only went up to like 5 or 6.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's wow. I don't know. I don't even know what to think of that. But like, shows me doing this like interview was showing me how much of a shut-in I've been like a lot of my life. Like I don't know. I've never even heard of such a thing, and like I don't know. That seems so. Do they help you with like communication skills and everything growing up? They help you with like being a person?
At Montessori?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that sounds like stage development for interacting with the world around you at large, versus more worrying about what you know and how you do on tests.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly. So, and Katie and Austin.
Yeah.
They're the Montessori teachers in Felix's classroom.
Gotcha.
My 8-year-old. And then Jamie, my 5-year-old, is in the primary classroom. And so just for instance, like the kids in the primary room have, the kids have like rotating tasks. And, you see this in a lot of schools. And so I think a lot of teachers out there are very smart about education and development and take a lot of the same types of like sequential learning. As a former public school teacher, I can say that that's part of stuff that we all learn. But for instance, in the Montessori classroom, Jamie will be like the lunch helper, and so he'll get everybody's placemats and silverware and cups out, and then the other lunch helper will like pour water or milk into the cups, and the kids will learn about like sweeping, and they'll do like little window washing. But it's all when they're choosing to do those things. Like one of the times of the day will be like a work cycle when kids choose what work they want to do. And it might be building with blocks, or it might be sentence construction, or stringing beads, or working with math manipulatives, or it might be you grab the little caddy with the rag and the squeegee and the spray, and you go wash some of the windows, because that sounds like a fun, interesting thing to do. Or it might be you get the little toolbox and your safety glasses, and you go nail nails into a log. Or it might be painting,
That last one sounds pretty traditional. Just, hey kid, here's some nails. This log needs more nails. Just, there you go.
So then when the kids get older, in the elementary room, the ways that they are learning their academic skills are through, aside from like, you know, one-on-one or small group lessons that are about specific, like, learn about sentence construction and grammar, but then the kids will say like, hey, we want to do a skit, you know, we want to make create a skit about this historical thing or based on this novel we've read, or Felix has come home with like, this is a poster about this animal I really love, or this is, you know, Peter and I are making a world, and that's an imaginary, you know, fantasy world, and Katie says we can do writing work that's like cataloging the animals that live in this world, you know. So it's a very, very like child-led and individual choices led, and like the kids do gardening at school and construction projects at school. And if the kids are like, oh, I wish we had this thing, Austin might say like, well, maybe we can create that thing, you know. They also do a lot of baking.
It's cool that it's flexible. Like,
oh yeah,
that's really cool. It's not nearly as rigid as like, I don't know, get in line, shut up, tell me what the color blue is.
Yeah. I mean,
what numbers come between 3 and 6 right now?
Yeah, and ideally, every child would have the space and the time and the resources to do so much self-determination. And I think a lot of teachers, regardless of the format they're teaching in, do everything they can to create those environments in their classrooms.
That self-determination.
Yeah.
That is something I think that a lot of people need.
Yeah.
That we do not have as like a common even idea that people have, you know. That's something that I'm learning to do now, you know, this far in my life. You know, and so knowing that there's like a school system that kind of encourages and develops that is actually really awesome.
Yeah.
So that's wild. So
that's cool.
It's an awesome that like you have that and that your kids get that. And I knew Katie and Austin, the regulars here, taught.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that's the kind of teaching that they were doing.
Yep.
You know, I just assumed they were like normal school teachers. I was like, yeah, okay. You teach preschool or whatever. Like,
no, they're pretty badass. And there are also people who were customers of ours in our old spot.
So they've been here for a long time too.
Yep. Yeah, since before our kids were old enough for school at all.
Yeah. Yeah, your kids were babies at one point.
They were babies at one point. It's really interesting how that happens, isn't it?
Wild. I know them as children, but at one point they were like not children,
right?
Babies.
Yeah. When we started the original form of Bierly Brewing, it was right when Felix was being born. That's when JP was starting his own kind of solo brewing adventure at that restaurant in Philomath. And then it was when right before Jamie was born, actually, in 2000, like the fall of 2018. And then he was born in the spring of 2019, that we were opening our first little tasting room, tiny pub thing. And Felix was about 3 at that point. So, yeah, the kids have really grown up in our business in a lot of ways, especially because, 3 years of that were like, the school was limited because of the pandemic. Our resources and our audience was limited because people couldn't go as many places. And so the kids were just here or in the old place also a lot with us. It's challenging, but I think we all learned a lot from it, and I hope that the kids will look back and, even though they remember it as challenging, they'll think about some of the cool stuff that they got to do also.
So tell me about, I kind of interrupted you talking about your upbringing, your life. So we got to Montessori school. I had asked what that is.
Yeah.
So tell me about life, like, around that age and growing up. Like you went through the Montessori school and...
Yeah. After that, there was another private school in McMinnville for a while that was called Chrysalis Children's School. And it was, I would say that for the most part, it was as similar as like very small, a lot of freedom to kind of self-determine, a lot of flexibility with like, what are you interested in? Let's figure out how you can learn more about that. So that was a good environment. We spent so much time downtown as kids and teens also, just constantly on 3rd Street, constantly riding bikes around.
Do you feel that with the growth of population around here that riding a bike would be far less possible? The amount of cars that are just everywhere all the time?
It is trickier. I know a lot of people who still do it. JP will ride bikes with the kids a lot during the summer especially. And they have a good time. But I think there was a lot. When I talk to teenagers now and I ask them like, hey, where do you guys like to hang out downtown? Where do you find, places that are welcoming to you? I don't really get the same answers or any. They're like, sadly. But we had a lot of places that felt like we could just kind of hang out or just wander around. That was really nice growing up here.
Were you one of those kids where it felt like you spent a lot of time outside because hanging out at home wasn't really... Like, it's not that it wasn't an option, like it was a bad environment, but like it was boring as fuck. Like I grew up in the early 2000s, right? Like I 3rd grade in 2003. So like I was out and about from like 2000 through 2009 before I kind of shut myself in my room and never left, Yeah, I lived that hikikomori lifestyle for a long time where I only left. It was like an absolute necessity.
Yeah.
But I remember that like it wasn't that okay, so maybe for me a little bit it was like I can't be at home. It's not a great environment. But also, even if things weren't that way, I don't know what I would have been doing at home. Like riding my bike was what you do for entertainment.
Right?
Going places and standing there and staring at a tree was like what you did because you were bored.
Yep.
Not because it was, it wasn't the boring thing. It was the entertainment,
Yeah, I definitely
going to the library was its own adventure kind of a thing.
Hell yeah. Yeah. I loved reading a lot, so I often would have rather stayed home reading novels. That was a big part of my upbringing, a big part of like going out to an event. I always had to have a book with me because I didn't know about talking to people as much. Didn't feel as comfortable doing that all the time. But I always knew that if I had a book, I could, keep myself happy that way. I had friends who did BMX bikes, and I had rollerblades. And I would go out with them to like the skate park or whatever. I was never good at it, but I would roll around for a little bit while they were biking. Yeah, that was like a thing to do. Let's go do this for a while. My friends and I would make movies like with the camcorder and do. Yeah, I probably still have some of them somewhere. And
that's so badass.
Yeah.
Are we talking like it still used like the tape insert era, or was it digital? Yeah.
Well, okay, no, definitely not digital. Yeah, when so the first camcorder that we grew up with was, you remember the ones that you had to like hold on your shoulder? Yes.
Yeah, the newscaster style.
And they actually recorded onto full-size VHS tapes. That's the one we had at home. That we have like a bunch of home movies from Belgium from 1988 to 89 when we lived in Belgium that were recorded on that camcorder. And then we had a tripod that we would set it up and do skits and movies and stuff at home. And then it broke a lot, and I vividly remember its final life cycle had a lot of epoxy on it. My dad was a real epoxy guy, like 2-part, mix it yourself with the toothpick, smear it on the thing.
You can see it.
Yeah.
You see him, you go, that guy's a scientist, and he's definitely an epoxy guy.
Absolutely. So that was the final, death throes of that camcorder. And then we got one that recorded onto the little tapes. It's like bigger than a cassette tape, but not as big as a VHS tape.
Right. I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Like, I remember that era. That's around the time that, like, I came to the understanding of, like, camcorders in general.
Ooh.
Is, like, when it was, like, that weird middle size... I don't even remember... Do you remember what it was called?
No idea what it was.
Yeah, it's something. It had its own specific... acronym. But
Yeah, I don't remember. And then eventually, digital cameras. Digital recording, like phones and everything, changed everything. Because it used to be like a special occasion to get the camcorder out, or I would have to like, Daddy, can I get the camcorder out and record myself dancing and singing to the original Broadway production of Evita with Fatty Liput and Mandy Patinkin, please?
Wow. That's something.
That does exist.
Some sort of early warning sign. So growing up, rolling around, what can you tell me about like McMinnville at the time? What do you remember about, like, I don't know, what do you remember about growing up here, about like the city, about like your place in the city? Like, I don't know, I guess I want to know more about like your connection to like what those experiences rolling around, hanging out around town, how that impacted you as a person, as an entity growing up. Like, those kinds of moments really define me, like what the experiences I had growing up around town. Like, what are some of the memories you have around here that are like, I remember this day like it was yesterday kind of feeling? I remember a guy, I met him outside. He had blue hands when I was like 12.
Yeah.
And my friend was trying to be friendly because he was kind of weird. He was like, hey man, kind of cold outside, right? It was like 40 degrees outside. And he goes, oh, you think this is bad? I'm from a place where it was like 70 below. And we just never said another word to him. We power walked away as fast as we could. His hands were blue, man. We didn't get it. We were like, what are you?
Wow. Blue,
did you just get back from the negative 70? Like,
yeah, right. They actively frostbitten. Ouch. I'm trying to think of some of those defining moments. Being here as a young person in, largely the 90s. I was born in 86. Really suffused me with a love for this space and the community in a way that I think informs a lot of the community work I do now. And I think a lot of what I remember is
back in the meditative pose.
Like being downtown or being at Linfield with my parents because they both taught there, or being at, concerts or at restaurants and events, and is feeling like the people who make up the community were doing it because of how much they cared, and not for like
stats.
Yeah, and not just like, well, this is how we live our lives. We go through the motions, whatever. But I think, and maybe all small towns are like this. I don't know.
Putting like intent into like their place in their community.
Yeah.
The things they do.
Yeah, I think of McMinnville as a very cultivated space, but in a good way, not like a fake way.
Right.
I would hope. And I think that's kind of what I learned as a kid. I'm trying to remember, like, I did a lot of theater at Gallery as a kid, being in plays as a very young child. And I remember a lot of that very clearly, being backstage, like being taken care of by these grown-ups who I didn't necessarily know them. But I think that really built the sense of community that I have, that like you don't have to be in somebody's life directly to care for them and want to cultivate a positive space for them to be in.
Right. That you don't have to know them personally to want them to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And like be comfortable where they are.
Yeah.
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 I
And
get
that's
that a lot.
Yeah, that's what I learned here, being downtown a lot, being, in the businesses here, knowing a lot of people, but also just feeling welcome in a way that felt really good, even if I didn't know the people. And I will say that I hope that a lot of my peers felt that way, and also it is a very privileged perspective to have.
It's cool that you acknowledge that. Not a lot of people feel like that's the base, that it should be that kind of perspective, but you kind of have to have that to recognize it at first, and not everyone starts with that kind of community.
Yeah.
That's rad.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking like I'm going to wrap things up here. I really appreciate you talking with me.
Thank you.
Does mean, though, I have to get to the most important question of the interview. If the moon was made of jerky, would you eat it?
Yes.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Ames Bierly.
You're welcome.
Fucking excellent chatting with you.
Thank you. It's been great.
Yeah. I'll see you at work on Friday.
Let's see it work on Friday.